If you think WWE's history is just about championships, iconic entrances, and Hall of Fame moments, there's another side most fans rarely hear about. The names that once lit up the screen, drew attention for a brief moment, and then quietly vanished as if they were never really there at all. Some of these women were once pushed as the future of the division, some were part of unforgettable eras, and others barely had time to introduce themselves before the spotlight moved on. Yet today, their presence in WWE's official memory feels almost erased. But their stories didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. They just continued somewhere else. And once you start looking closely, you realize just how many familiar faces WWE seems to have left behind. Let's step back into that hidden layer of wrestling history and revisit the women who once stood under the bright lights but are now barely mentioned at all. It all begins with Amy Weber, a name that perfectly represents how quickly WWE could bring someone in with promise and just as quickly let them slip away. She first entered the company through the 2004 Divas search, a time when WWE was actively searching for fresh personalities to shape its women's division. Amy didn't win the competition, finishing behind Christy Hemme, Carmella de Cesar, and Joy Giovanni, but she still did enough to earn a contract. That alone showed she had something the company wanted on screen. Once she arrived, she was placed into JBL's cabinet, playing the role of an image consultant during John Bradshaw Layfield's rise as a dominant heel champion. It was a flashy, rich, over-the-top presentation, and Amy fit right into that world as part of JBL's entourage. But her time on television was surprisingly short. Outside of a single televised match against Joy Giovanni, her in-ring exposure remained extremely limited. Behind the scenes, however, things were reportedly far less polished. Amy later spoke about uncomfortable experiences backstage and frustrations that went beyond creative decisions. By early 2005, she was gone from WWE entirely, leaving behind a run that feels like a blink in history. And just like that, WWE moved on without ever really revisiting her contribution. Then there's AJ Lee, someone whose absence from WWE conversations feels almost impossible considering how influential she actually was. AJ didn't just appear during the Divas era, she helped define it at its peak. Her personality stood out immediately, unpredictable, sharp, and completely different from the typical presentation of women at the time. She eventually became one of the most decorated figures in the division, tying Eve Torres for the most Divas Championship reigns with 3, and holding a combined 406 days as champion, the longest total reign in the title's history. She also played a major role as Raw general manager in one of the most unusual authority figure storylines of her era. But despite all of that, her name often feels strangely absent when WWE looks back at its past. A major reason often pointed to is her real-life connection to CM Punk, whose long-standing tensions with WWE created a complicated shadow over anything linked to him. As time went on, AJ's achievements seemed to get quieter treatment from the company. Still, fans never forgot her, and with both AJ and Punk eventually returning to the wrestling spotlight in different ways, it only reinforced the idea that certain stars don't disappear just because WWE stops mentioning them. Lauren Jones followed a very different path, and her story is one of the rare ones where leaving early may have been the smartest move she could have made. She entered WWE through the 2004 SmackDown Rookie Diva competition at No Way Out, where she stood out enough to get noticed even without winning. WWE had plans for her, including a potential storyline involving Dawn Marie, which would have placed her in an early featured role. But instead of committing to wrestling, Lauren made a decision that surprised many at the time. She walked away. What seemed like a risky exit turned into a major turning point. She became a spokesperson for MetRx Nutrition, competed in Miss Mississippi 2009 where she placed as first runner-up, and even stepped into acting with appearances in films like Spider-Man 3 and The Expendables. Later, she built her own business by founding Lauren Lorraine Shoes and taking on a leadership role in the company. Looking back, her WWE chapter feels less like a missed opportunity and more like a brief stop on a much bigger journey. Carmella de Cesar, another Divas Search standout, also followed a path that led far beyond WWE. She was one of the most visually striking contestants of the 2004 competition and finished as runner-up behind Christy Hemme. WWE gave her a contract and she briefly entered storylines, including a feud involving him, but nothing ever fully developed into something long-term. Her WWE presence faded quickly, but outside the company, she built a strong career in modeling. She had already appeared as Playboy's Miss April in 2003, later featured in multiple swimsuit publications, including Sports Illustrated. Over time, she stepped away from entertainment and built her family life with former NFL quarterback Jeff Garcia, becoming a mother of 4. Her WWE run may have been short, but her life after wrestling became far more stable and established.
Tiffany's story takes a different turn, because unlike others who disappeared quickly, she actually held power on WWE television. She first appeared in ECW as assistant general manager before becoming the official general manager of the brand from 2008 to 2010. During that time, she played a visible on-screen authority role, while ECW was still trying to maintain its identity within WWE's structure. After ECW ended, she transitioned into wrestling on SmackDown and teamed with Kelly Kelly as part of the Blonde Tourage pairing. But everything changed in 2010 when she was involved in a domestic incident with Drew McIntyre. The situation led to her arrest and suspension, and WWE eventually released her later that year. Her career ended abruptly, and WWE has rarely acknowledged her role since. Jaime Keys had one of the shortest WWE runs imaginable. Before WWE, she appeared briefly in TNA alongside Kevin Nash, but her time there was minor. She joined WWE in 2010 as part of NXT Season 3, a season remembered more for its odd structure than meaningful development. Contestants were placed in bizarre challenges rather than meaningful wrestling progression. Despite her strong presentation and presence, Jaime never had the chance to evolve on screen. She was eliminated quickly and released just days later. Her WWE story feels like it barely even started before it was already over. Chrissy Bane's time in WWE was even less limited. She trained in developmental territories like FCW and Deep South Wrestling before making a brief SmackDown appearance in 2007 where she attacked Victoria after a match. It seemed like the start of something, but it wasn't. Shortly after, she disappeared due to personal circumstances and never returned. Her name slowly faded into the background of Divas history. Tori, on the other hand, was part of a much earlier era. Debuting in 1998, she initially portrayed an obsessive fan of Sable, a character-driven role that immediately made her stand out. She later became involved in storylines with Kane, X-Pac, and D-Generation X, placing her in the center of one of WWE's most chaotic periods. She even competed in one of WWE's earliest women's hardcore matches against Ivory, marking a small piece of history. By 2001, her WWE journey ended, and she transitioned into a quieter life as a yoga instructor and studio owner. Brooke Adams appeared in ECW as part of Extreme Exposé alongside Kelly Kelly and Layla, a presentation focused more on entertainment than competition. Her WWE run was brief and didn't give her much space to grow, but her career truly flourished afterward in TNA, where she became a multiple-time Knockouts champion and established herself as a respected in-ring performer. Oksana's WWE story reflects uncertainty more than anything else. She entered through NXT Season 3 and later became an assistant to Teddy Long before managing Antonio Cesaro in his early WWE days. Despite regular screen time, she never had a clearly defined role. After less than 3 years, she left WWE in 2014 without ever being fully established. Lauren Mayhew's WWE career lasted only a few weeks. She worked as an ECW ring announcer in 2009, but was never given an on-screen character or storyline. Her contract wasn't renewed, and she quickly returned to entertainment outside wrestling. Jackie Gaida is remembered for one infamous moment more than anything else, a poorly executed 2002 tag match that became widely criticized. Despite that, she continued in TNA before eventually stepping away from wrestling and building a family and business life. Lena Yada had multiple chances through diva search competitions before finally signing with WWE. She worked in backstage roles and later wrestled briefly before being released shortly after her debut match. She later found stability in her personal life, marrying musician David Draymond. Joy Giovanni, another Diva Search finalist, was mostly used in short backstage roles and limited storylines. Her run ended in 2005 with a brief return appearance years later in the WrestleMania 25 Battle Royal. BB, or Barbara Bush, appeared during the late WWF era in small roles focused more on presentation than wrestling. After leaving, she worked in WCW and TNA under different names before fading from the industry. Courtney Taylor had one of the quickest rises and falls imaginable, working briefly as an ECW interviewer before being replaced within weeks. She later appeared in a strange Raw segment and was released shortly after. Rochelle Lohan appeared in minor SmackDown segments in 2004 and then moved into other entertainment ventures, including the Lingerie Football League. Maria Kanellis had a more notable WWE run, but still finds herself rarely mentioned in modern retrospectives. Her time included both on-screen popularity and backstage controversy that may have influenced how often she is remembered. Anastasia appeared briefly as a backstage interviewer in 2007, but failed to leave any lasting impression and was released in 2008. Finally, Rebecca DiPietro entered through Diva Search 2006, worked as an ECW interviewer, trained in wrestling development, and appeared occasionally before requesting her release in 2007. Looking back at all these names, one thing becomes clear. WWE's history is full of faces that once seemed important in the moment, yet over time their presence quietly faded. Not because they didn't matter, but because wrestling moves forward at a pace where only a few stories get remembered. The rest, they become whispers in the background of a much bigger show.